for the first time in like 20 years.
All right. It's 2:00. We'll call the December 29th special meeting of the Trinity County Board of Supervisors to order. Supervisor Cox, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, county matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters and are listed alphabetically by department. A member of the board, staff, or public may request an item be heard out of order. Do you have any requests to change the order of any of these items?
I would request that we change the order. Maybe I would like. I'm sorry. Apologize. No, the order's great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll move on to building and development services. Item 1.1. Take the following action regarding the establishment of County Code Section 15.26 electric vehicle charging station permit expediting. 1, find the adoption and implementation of this ordinance to be exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061B3, the common sense exemption, which applies to projects where the activity will not result in a significant effect on the environment. 2, introduce and waive the reading of an ordinance establishing Trinity County Code Section 15.26 regarding electric vehicle charging station permit expediting.
Thank you, Chair, Supervisors, and members of the public. My name is Skylar Fisher, Associate Planner with the Trinity County Planning Department. I hope everyone had a good holiday. I'm going to spend the next few minutes discussing item 1.1, which is a draft ordinance for an electric vehicle charging station permit expediting. And so I can briefly go over what this is. So jurisdictions are required by state law to pass a permit streamlining ordinance for electric vehicle charging stations per AB 1236 and AB 970. So that is what's before you today. As part of that as well is having a checklist available online and at the department for like an application and what's required for an electric vehicle charging station. So theoretically, what would happen is somebody would look at that, they would fill it all out, and that would be a tool in streamlining the process because they know all the requirements for it. And so I printed out a table on the state's electric vehicle charging station booklet that I found online. And so it discusses what AB 1236 sets out to do, which is what this ordinance is also doing is would, if it was be passed, would say that the county is committed to expediting the review of electric vehicle charging stations. So some of the objectives include creating this ordinance, having a checklist of all those requirements available. So that was that checklist I discussed before. Finding that if a project meets all of those checklist items, then that means that project is eligible for that expedited review. And so that could be as like a non-discretionary permit. And then focusing the review of these projects for health and safety, allowing electronic signatures on these applications, and as well as if there is any deficiencies, it lays out the way in which the jurisdictions, that be the county, would reach out and say, okay, here's the deficiencies on your application, and here's the way forward on fixing that. So those are the basic things that the checklist kind of outlines for bringing the county into compliance for this requirement, as well as last time we discussed amending the application, ways to include like an electronic panel as part of the application, so somebody doesn't have to submit multiple applications if they want to do this, and like an electric service, which the building department said was possible. So all of that being said, planning department staff recommends the Trinity County Board of Supervisors find this adoption of the draft ordinance to be exempt per CEQA guidelines section 15061B3, and also introduce and waive the reading of an ordinance establishing Trinity County Code section 15.26 regarding electric vehicle charging station permit expediting. And I don't know if Margaret had anything to add, but I wanted to pivot it over to you if you did.
Thanks, Skylar. At the board meeting last week, the board had inquired about whether there'd be ability to limit the zones in which these electric charging stations are allowed in. I hadn't done the research on that, and so I have subsequently done that to bring it back today. I've also reached out to RCRC and to their general counsel, who was very helpful in pointing us in the right direction in terms of getting at least some guidance. And was also very good at providing us some insight into what would happen if this board decided to go in another direction. So his analysis and my analysis as well comes down to the fact that it's somewhat unclear whether we can limit the zoning. If we're to do a plain reading of the code, it is silent in terms of whether there can be limitation. But if you look at the first draft version that came under SB 1291, there was specific language in there that did allow for the EV charging stations to be done by permit and limit the zone. The alternate version that was passed removed this language, which somewhat indicates that it was the intent of the legislature to not allow local government to have these types of limitation. There's also a preamble as part of the legislation that talks about making sure that local agencies do not adopt ordinances to create barriers. And so it's anticipated that was specifically targeted towards not allowing local governments to put in types of restrictions as was contemplated by this board. The next issue that I researched and I spoke with Mr. Wyleen about as well is the issue of what happens if the board decides to not move forward on this. Mr. Wyleen said at this point he has not heard of any enforcement programs or any types of restrictions that they were intending to do. Obviously, if we were to do it, you're opening up to legal challenge by somebody who'd like to put a charging station in a zone that is not allowed. But from the RCRC's perspective, non-compliance by the local jurisdictions typically sets up the state to start putting more restrictions or more restrictive legislation going forward. And so while it may not have an impact necessarily on this, is that we can anticipate that the next round of legislation that has a negative impact on local jurisdictions will be harsher with harsher penalties and not having ability to have local control even more pronounced. So that's kind of the RCRC perspective, but obviously from county council's perspective, it does open us up to legal challenge.
Anyone have any technical questions of either Skylar or council?
So, council, why doesn't the state take the lead, become the lead agency in this? Because obviously they're attempting to take all rights from the county, and why don't they just have this permitted through them?
Supervisor, it's hard for me to speak on behalf of the state because I do not know what their intent was in doing that. Most likely they are facing the same staffing shortage and inability to process that local jurisdictions are, and that they took the easiest way out, which was to place the unfunded mandate on local jurisdictions and provide no mechanism for the local jurisdictions to protest.
So in theory, you could have between the only process we have is health and safety. So there could be a massive buildup in this in a residential area if there was the property available.
That is a risk. There are still, as you said, health and safety. There are certain things that we can still enforce, but based on the way this legislation was written, they are very few and very far between. And I do think a health and safety would still allow us to put some restrictions on it. But I'm not sure about the science behind these stations and what potential danger they would have. So we'd have to get environmental health involved on that.
I could see some limitations, but basically I could see this being put anywhere somebody wanted it to be. And that's kind of the intent, right?
Correct.
Okay.
With that health and safety piece, could we at least somehow require a director's use permit so that these things do get noticed in a way that the public is aware and can at least respond instead of it just showing up?
So, I mean, the answer is going to be the same as it's to putting it in specific zones, is that they have a specific provision in the legislation that says it's the intent of this legislation that local agencies not adopt ordinances that create unreasonable barriers in the installation of zero emission vehicle infrastructure. So my guess is they would view it in the same manner.
Except also in that legislation, they say that it can be stopped if there's an appeal and there's no way to appeal the process. So you could stand on the fact that they allow an appeal, that there has to be some sort of public notification.
You are correct that they do articulate, well, they don't articulate the appeal process.
No.
They just say you can appeal it, but basically cut off the ability to appeal it. So
we could stand on that you allow an appeal process. So therefore you must have didn't take in consideration how that process would work.
So I think there could be an argument that we could possibly have a requirement of public notice in order to trigger the appeal process. I don't think any additional restrictions on the type of permits or the ability to seek what would be anticipated, but we could have some mechanism to publish it so that at least triggers. But with a director's use permit, that would go in direct violation to what they're asking or the streamlining process they're putting in there.
No other
No
technical
more
questions? All right.
Technical questions.
Care to make a motion?
We have to go to public.
Public comment. Thank you.
Joe Morio, Agricultural Commissioner and sealer of weights and measures. And, people don't think about this, but just like gas pumps, how do you know you got enough electricity that you're charged? Because the current state of the affair is we have a not yet adopted test thing for the slow charge. Of course, everybody wants the fast charge. That has not been invented yet. The state has 5 of them. They say they'll lend them out. They're $35,000 a pop. And I think they're going up with the supply chain stuff. But those 5, probably they go to Los Angeles area and they'll wear them out before they get somewhere else. So we don't have the ability to test these things. And it's only going to take one complaint. And then I'm going to have to say, well, I don't know, because we can't test them. We're working on this. That's why I go to those weights and measures. One of the reasons I go to the weights and measures conferences, but this is a work in progress. This is very troubling. It's being jammed down our throat. And there's other questions like, where is all this electricity going to come? We're talking about replacing liquid fuel with electricity. So unless we're going to cite, 900 more dams and make it, exempt from CEQA, there's a lot of problems. But from the weights and measures perspective, we will not be able to test the devices if we get complaints. And we aren't going to get to that point for a good long while, unless y'all give me a couple $1 million and then we could probably get there. So thank you.
Any other public comment?
Good afternoon, Chair, Board. My name is Ed Presley. I'm speaking as a concerned citizen. So this actually was brought up to to me by my wife a few weeks ago, and she was talking about these mandatory charging stations. And now we're dealing with the streamlining of the, expediting and all that stuff, so these things can go into place. And I'm not trying to corner PG&E over onto one side, but what my wife had brought up to me and was laughing about was the fact that over the course of the summer, we had rolling blackouts down south. We were told not to charge, not to run your AC between 4 and 7. So how much government involvement and forcing of what happens on a local level really should be taking place? And that's my comment.
Any public comment on Zoom?
I have no raised hands, no chats.
All right, with that, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board.
I'll just say that I think, there's a good opportunity for the county to reach out to the state administration regarding a lot of the issues that were brought up specifically today. I think there was more in detail today than there were than what was mentioned at past board meetings around this item. And there's a lot of validity in those points. So as opposed to having a blatant, no, it's a great opportunity, and maybe even for some of the incoming board members to say, I just got elected. Here I am. I'm a board member. There's this one thing that we're trying to do, but this is the issue with it. And it's kind of a nice opportunity as a kind of a semi non-contentious introductory item. That'll just be my kind of suggestion. I'm not necessarily going to make a motion on this, but it could be a good opportunity, I think, to bring up valid points, especially with the electricity source. And kind of the flip side of it is that because Trinity County has TPUD, our EV stations can be green energy, and that can have a lot of appeal where, we could be the poster child of green energy and EV charging stations, but we have some issues with that. And maybe it's a nice leverage opportunity to get some meetings in Sacramento.
So Jeremy, are you proposing that this be continued until board members have a meeting, or we request that the state come here and explain this, to answer questions to this board?
I can only speak on my experience, and I think when I was 2 years into the position as supervisor, I reached out to the state regarding EV charging stations because I think there was a decent amount of grant monies out there, or essentially the state had some sort of program working with local jurisdictions to develop early on adoption of EV support one way or another, either through ordinance or through actual charging stations. And they have, I believe online, they have got a map that shows charging stations kind of for EV itineraries and things like that. And Trinity County wasn't listed on there. And so I had reached out to them initially to say, hey, we've got green energy. We're on a tourist highway. Let's find a way to work together to make this a benefit for the state, a benefit for the county, a benefit for TPUD, the environment, whatever the direction or the perspective is going to be. But they never responded to me. And so I've got a little scar because it's nice to get a response from the state, especially, I think. And if the state's coming up with all of these recommendations or, theoretically force feeding these requirements, I think it's appropriate to be able to use the opportunity to say, we actually want to have a sit down face to face with you. And, as it relates to RCRC and the legal counsel there, no other county has pushed back. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. It could be a good thing because Trinity County could be the one voice to do it with using the leverage of TPUD's power and trying to be that kind of poster child for green energy, if that's the way that the state's going to go. And, you know, that's the way the whole country is trying to push too, essentially from the transportation, whatever it is, department at the White House, is they're all pushing for electric. It's probably inevitable for the, you know, until it's scientifically proven otherwise. But if I were to make a motion, I would probably make a motion to approve as presented and still reach out to have those conversations and to still open it up, because a lot of it's just about CEQA in this ordinance. That's my understanding. And there's still individual review on each application. It's not like this bypasses the planning department's application process. So if it were me, I would make a motion to approve it as presented and tie that along with a request to the state administration to have a meeting regarding the concerns over the CEQA aspect of it, but also to address the concerns from weights and measures perspective, and with the power outages and with green energy. Yeah,
So is that a motion?
I believe I stated that. Yeah.
You said if you were to make a motion, it would be that. So, all right, we have a motion. Would anyone care to second that motion? Or make a competing motion?
I'll second that for discussion.
All right.
So my experience is that once we pass it, you know, the state's not going to care one way or the other. We have no leverage with them once it's a done deal. I'm going to ask another technical question. So since the reality in this new world we have coming is that probably hydrogen cell technology is going to be way ahead of electric technology, can we in this ordinance write in that any hydrogen cell station can bypass CEQA?
So no, they would have to be specifically in the state ordinance. CEQA is required unless it meets one of the exemptions or the state specifically states that's not required. This ordinance from the state doesn't contemplate that.
So I think one way or the other, it should be transmitted to the state that this is a county that really cares about CEQA. We've been in lawsuits for years, and a large part of our industrial base in this county has been destroyed or slowed down by CEQA, and that people here take CEQA very seriously, and they want the CEQA complied with. And we've seen this time and time again by a pushback by a large percentage of our county. I don't know if it's a majority or not, but it is. So I don't know. There's probably no county in the state that understands CEQA more than Trinity County does, because we've spent years fighting over it. So that kind of special circumstance, I would think, would need to be relayed to the state before any decision was made.
Isn't there a time restraint?
Yeah, I just got a text message from Letty to remind us that this ordinance goes into effect or state law goes into effect on January 1st. So
that was kind of why I was leaning towards the adoption of it and then still reaching out.
And personally, I'm still struggling with the whole concept, because I don't know. To me, it seems absolutely crazy that we're going to allow commercial vehicle charging stations anywhere in our county without having to do anything but a checklist. And then if somebody somehow manages to realize that it's happening before they build it, they could appeal it. I think that's crazy, and that I would be more inclined to try to figure out a way to add some restrictions and then ask the state to come explain why we can't have them, because it seems absolutely ludicrous to me that we're going to allow this anywhere in our county. Personally, I don't see that we're going to have a big influx of people building EV charging stations all over downtown Weaverville anytime soon. But the idea of it, especially after the past several years I've had of wrestling over what's allowed in rural residential or what's allowed in residential zoning and whether or not you can have a rooster, I think that this is something that we should have some control over, not just have it handed to us that, yeah, you can do it wherever.
With that, I'll make a motion that we send this to the planning commission for them to consider what zones would be allowable within this, and to I had something else. I'm sorry. That we send it to planning commission to recommend what zones would be allowable to this to be to fit the state's program. And then we can go, and this is just comment afterwards. I guess I'll wait if I get a second or not.
Yeah, I'll second that for discussion.
So that way we have the public, and the other thing is I'd like them to consider if it gets a DUP in this process, because I think the state clearly in one level, it looks for public process, and in the whole state system is designed for transparency and vetting these things publicly. And we've heard nothing but criticism about not being transparent when we're way more transparent than this process. So I think that way we would also have the ability at that time to, whoever board members would like to reach out to the state and get that information from the state at the time. I don't think that this time date is going to be something the state, as long as we're working towards a solution, is going to be terribly concerned about. So,
Just to confirm, does the seconder also agree to modify the motion to require or ask the planning commission to look at whether a director's use permit would be acceptable?
Yes.
Thank you.
I just thought, and maybe I didn't read it clearly enough, I thought that was expressly forbidden. We weren't supposed to go down the use permit, whether directors or conditional at all. This was supposed to end up being more what is the word I'm looking for? Yeah, it starts with an M and it says just go do it.
Mandate.
Somebody's saying it.
Ministerial.
Thank you. Correct, council. That's what they're looking for.
That is the way it is written. Yes.
Mhm. And so, okay, so there's 2 points of pushback, and I'm wondering which one gets noticed. If we adopt this with our own set of, okay, we'll adopt it, but we're doing it this way, to them, Trinity County just adopted. Or if we don't adopt it today because we send this back to the Planning Commission for zoning consideration, then on the greater radar, Trinity County is the non-compliant child. So what does anybody see as the comparison and ramifications of either of those decisions?
I don't know. I tend to lean more toward past what we think is right today, and then ask them to explain why it doesn't work for them. Because then we fulfilled our end of the bargain just a little bit differently than they anticipated. And I really don't know. It's galling to me that we can be handed this. It just remove EV charging station and put cannabis packaging facility in there and see what happens. We would have a full auditorium, I guarantee you that. And there would be our own little contingent of people standing in front of the the Capitol building in Sacramento. It doesn't matter really to me what it is. It's the state overreach that is a little hard for me to swallow. It seems to me like we should have some say in where businesses are put into our communities. And that's why I think also, I don't know, if we send it to the planning commission, that definitely gets us way past the deadline, but there needs to be a definite dividing line between a commercial EV charging station and your own personal EV charging station. Those are the kind of things that there should be differences between jurisdictions, because there's differences between every neighborhood. So this is a tough one to get done in one day, but I would like to see us, I would kind of like to see us try to get it done today and send something back to the state that shows what we want. Council looks a little concerned.
No, not at all.
So what does your motion look like?
I don't know. My brain's still slightly cloudy.
It looks like we're gonna be the non-compliant child. Which, I mean, when it comes down to it, I guess it's probably the best thing for our county. I know that the state wants it done within 4 days, whatever it is. I'm fine with being a non-compliant child in this case. I think that we have a lot of things to talk about as a county. Not sure what the ramifications will be from the state. I don't think they'll be, I hate to guess what they'll be, but I don't think they'll be that bad. But, we have to do what's right for us. I don't think we can be forced to do this thing, at this time. It doesn't sit good with me at all. Not at all. My vote would be to be the non-compliant child at this point. I don't know. I put that into a motion, up for discussion a little bit more on that. But we're not going to get this done today and satisfy all the things that we need to talk about. And I would not go forward because I think, as Keith said, once we say that we're compliant today, that's it. The state thinks we're compliant. We've gone down their road. We won't get anything changed. So with that being said, I am still the non-compliant child.
I do. I do want to point out that this does show a weakness that we have in county government that we would like to see fixed in the future. This bill was passed 7 years ago. And so in most counties have the same issues that you just kind of put it aside and put it aside and put it aside. But I think a goal, and this is just kind of a general statement, a goal in the future is to deal with these things ahead when we have the opportunity, and our capacity is limited. So striving to have dealt with this last year or whatever would be a benefit for us moving forward. But back to Liam. So Liam, are you proposing we just vote this down now, period, with no other action?
Was there a motion passed to send this to the planning commission?
Yes. Well, it wasn't passed.
Was the motion put forward?
Yeah.
That was by Dan?
No, it was by Keith.
That was by me to have them look at proper zoning and seeing if there's a DUP process or not necessarily a public vetting process of some sort, where people can say, you know what, no, we don't want a 200 charging station in our residential subdivision.
Keith, you want to put that in the terms of a?
Well, that I do have that on the table as a motion.
And it's already been seconded, so that's
okay.
one of the ones we've discussed. Jill's got 2 seconds going right now. So.
I do, because I want to talk about everything.
Yeah, it's perfect.
So what I would hope is that we wouldn't chew up our third spot on the table right now with anything that's terribly similar to these. If somebody wants to change one of those, I would hope that supervisors would just alter the motion that they have, because I'm interested, when Dan's head clears, what he's going to come up with if we wanted to pass this today. What kind of components you think you would put into that motion?
I would definitely want to separate commercial from residential. And my thought, and I said it at the last meeting, is sure, let's expedite the process for all commercial charging stations that are within zoning that allows for a gas station. And let's expedite all residential charging stations. I wouldn't have any problem with that, because then it would be in the proper zoning. Other than that, I don't know of another way to look at it.
So what I'm thinking is, do we fly a little lower under the radar if we just complied our way?
So I have a question to council. If we did set a zoning, and if it gets challenged or not, but wouldn't by law this have to go in front of the planning commission for public vetting?
So there is a requirement that any changes that affect zoning do need to be first run by the planning commission, correct?
I mean, that's where I was coming from on this, is that if we did come forward with this and say it's going to be in highway commercial only, that would have to be vetted through the planning commission.
Correct.
But we wouldn't be changing zoning, right? We would just be allowing another use within established.
It would become a zoning ordinance, so it would have to be heard by the.
So it's not changing the zoning, it's affecting zoning.
So in that sense,
Correct.
That's not going to happen today.
right.
Right.
In which case, if we pass it that way, then we're more limiting the planning commission instead of allowing them to more, I guess, thoughtfully or openly vet other options.
We really can't pass that. We can only direct the planning commission
To take it
to
up.
consider it.
And just, I'm not sure this will help or not, but Ms. Hawkins pointed out earlier, is that we will be out of compliance no matter what, because it will take a first and a second reading before it's passed. And so that will happen past the January 1st date. So I'm not necessarily sure if January 3rd is or January 28th is going to make much of a difference from the state if we have a plan going forward. So I would be confident in telling the state that we have issues we're looking at, but it's still on our radar if they were to question why we're not compliant.
I mean, I will say my experience with the state, as long as you're working on the problem, the state usually is very considerate in, they may just say, well, those crazy people in Trinity County, it makes them take some time to do everything, but that's fine. But they don't seem to throw the hammer down that this is the date and you're going to die if you don't follow that rule. As long as we're moving forward, it's a solution.
And I really don't think it would probably become that much of an issue unless we had somebody say they wanted to put one of these in and we were holding them up. And I don't know how many of these applications Skylar has sitting on her desk, but I would assume it's probably not a very thick pile. So, do we have any other further?
Well, the other question that I would have is that even if we go through this process, planning commission makes a recommendation, bring it to the board, we say that makes sense, we're still non-compliant because we're still not doing what we've been directed to do. So we may be pushing a penalty down the road, but we're still facing an unknown repercussion. And how much margin? I just don't like either answer.
Well, I mean, what I see as today is we do basically three things. We pass it and just say, you know, we're, daddy's told us to do it and why waste any more time? Two is we defy them and say, you know, we say no at this time, give us a different option. Or three, we just ignore it and say, hey, state, this is your problem, not, you know, you're giving us a mandate that we can't comply with that violates the county's rights in this. And so you become lead agency. That's fine, become lead agency. But if we go to the planning commission, my thought is we go to the planning commission and say, hey, they're going to say, well, that's not exactly what we wanted, but yeah, that's what we're working with you. We're setting compliance where we're streamlining this process, but in a limited area. And so they will do what they're going to do. They're either going to accept that or not accept it, but at least we're saying that, yeah, we agree with this process, but not, you know, we're not going to put this in the backyard of the school or, you know, whatever zoning that we choose.
So I'm going to take a leap and chew up that third spot on the board here and make a motion that we move this decision to January 3rd. And here's why. Right now, only 3 of these 5 people are going to have to walk out the repercussions of anything that we choose. And there's 2 other people that are going to have to deal with the decision that's made here and the results of it. And it doesn't seem fair to not ask them what they think. It may be that one or both of them is really passionate about this. And they're like, hey, I will knock on the state's door every day till we get an answer. They may be like, are you kidding? Just say, yes, we don't have margin for a repercussion. And it just seems to me like if you're going to sit in the seat for 4 years and have to deal with it, and this is big, that they should be able to weigh in on that. And 5 extra days, I don't think is going to make a difference with the state.
I'll second.
Although we passed the deadline.
I know, but it's 5 more days.
Well, I'll say the only issue I would have with that would be then if we bring this back on the 3rd and we decide to send it to the planning commission, then we move it back another little while, which really I don't care if we're not compliant with the state mandate. That it doesn't make any sense. But it does. If it affects the planning commission date we can get on, then it pushes it back 2 weeks. Then we have to get it back to us. And then, you know what I mean? So it could, instead of 5 days, it could be 2 weeks.
It could, but I think that what we're really talking about here is trying to be fair to the people of Trinity County instead of just jumping through the state's hoops. And I think being fair to 2 supervisors who are going to have to deal with it is something to consider as important as well.
Or maybe they're sitting there going, God, please get this out of our way so we don't have to take crap for it.
They very well be,
They can say, oh, those idiots did it.
right?
I don't really know because to me the main thing here is we're not going to make this deadline even if we decided to do it today.
Chair, I'm sorry. Did Jill's get a second?
It did.
It did by
Okay, thank you.
Jeremy, I believe, or
Yes.
or both.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, does anybody need to further discuss anything, or are we just going to take a stab at voting on these at this point?
Let's take a stab at voting.
All right, we'll start with Jill's motion first.
Motion to continue to January 3rd. Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Gross?
No.
Gogan?
Aye.
Chairman Fraser?
Nope. All right, well, it passed. Yeah. I had another one of those freebie moments where.
So Chair, at this point, I have a point of order if I could. When I opened up the agenda yesterday, shortly after 2:00, when it was posted at 2, I opened up a little after 2 until 10:30. The server was down. I went to bed. I woke up at 3 a.m. I checked. It was up. I couldn't read it at 3 a.m. and have not had time in my day to read any of this. When I now upload what I'm seeing, the 360 some odd pages that I was pretty sure I saw yesterday now looks like 147 pages. So I'm wondering if I'm having an uploading problem today or where those extra pages went. And I'm feeling very uncomfortable with a public who's only had 24 hours notice. Much of the waking hours of that were not available for review of any of this. And my request is that we would move the next two items to January the 3rd when we've had sufficient time to understand what is being asked.
So I agree with Jill. Pretty much exactly the same thing happened to me last night.
Did you make a motion?
It was a point of order. I directed it to the chair.
All right, well,
I can address the page
I was gonna ask you.
issue if you'd like.
Yes.
When we originally posted the agenda, there was 300 and some odd pages. And after discussing with Ashley, realized that on the item for the grand jury report, she included the response from county council, which is not typically included at the point that we are bringing that item to you before you today. The response from county council was then removed and it was restitched and re-uploaded. So that's the difference in your page numbering.
Okay.
That was the change. The response from council would be provided to the board member who is assigned to respond to that report, and it will be attached when the response comes back before the board. But responses are not typically attached at the time of acknowledging receipt of and assigning a board member to respond to a grand jury report.
Okay, nice.
And as far as your request for continuation on them, I would lend the opinion or the thought process of, as far as the county council one goes, assigning a board member to respond. The sooner you can do that, the better, because we only have a certain number of days to respond for, and it's from the date that we receive the report, not from the date that you assign somebody to respond. So
Understood.
you're delaying their ability, whatever board member it is, their ability to start working on a response to that item.
Understood. And that's simple enough. Also, I would apologize to you two ladies. I would have asked you the page number question had I seen it before 5 minutes ago. I think it's good that you explained it to the public, but I simply would have given you opportunity to explain it. So thank you for that.
All right, so,
I also believe we have a time crunch on the cannabis department budget, and that's why we called a special meeting in the first place.
and
And the grand jury report, is our action is to assign somebody, but I think there's another action that we should take that if we get to that item. So I think that it's important that we hear that item, and then if it's decided later that we continue it, that's fine also. But that's up to the board as a whole. But I think these should be heard.
And that comment that you just made was the grand jury one or
Yes.
the cannabis one? Okay.
The whole reason we're having a meeting today is the department to get a budget adjusted, and so that's why we're here.
Actually, it's not. This has been on our calendars before we knew anything about a cannabis.
No,
and then we worked everything else into it.
Oh, my misunderstanding then. I'm sorry. I thought we were doing this because we pushed.
No, we pushed things to today.
Okay.
So I guess,
Then if we knew that, then I'm just still struggling with the amount of time there was not information available to the public or myself to deal with something. I'm not going to, I don't
see any wisdom in dealing with $1 million with less than 24 hours notice, particularly when at least 4 of those hours, working day hours, were removed from possibility. And so does a time crunch that 5 more days is going to make a difference? January 3rd is going to make a difference in this crunch. Should we, I mean, if it's cannabis, should we hear, can the planning director answer my question?
I think probably my thought moving forward would be, let's hear these items. And if we get a bunch of public comment that says, hey, we want to know more, we didn't get enough time to read this. If we have, if we as board members feel like we can't make a decision based on the information we have, then we'll continue it. And if we feel like we're comfortable making a decision at the end of hearing the item, then we can go with that.
I'm still super uncomfortable from the standpoint that I will say a charge that's rather before us today is a lack of transparency. And when we subtract 5 hours from a 24-hour notice budget dealing with $1 million, I'm very much not okay with that.
I would agree. I had the same problems as Jill, except for the waking up at 3 a.m. thing. Yeah, 147 pages is a lot to consume, especially during those key hours where, as a board member, I'm trying to take in all of that before the meeting today. I don't feel comfortable about making this big decision today. I would like to hear from possibly Drew or Ed if this time constraint and pushing it back to the 3rd is a killer for them or not. If not, I'm content with letting this go to the 3rd. Sorry, go ahead. Ed, if you'd like to speak.
Council, that's what I was gonna say. I would have to open this item up before I bring Ed or Drew up to answer questions, wouldn't I?
Please do. Yes. So I think we've gone past the point of order. So it would be reading the agenda items individually and then opening it up.
All right. And then we can have the discussion of whether or not we are comfortable after we hear.
Before we do that, can I have council opine on my point of order? Though, is it reasonable, council, that when we've lost this many hours and only 24 hours notice, that we even open things up, or is there a way to, what is your opinion on that level of transparency?
So I can't speak on whether folks had enough time to do it or your opinion on transparency. I can tell you what the law says in terms of the Brown Act in those posting requirements. There was a case that came out, I believe, 2 years ago that talked about inadvertent errors and delays in the websites. A couple of years ago, they did pass a law that says in order to have a valid meeting, you do have to have a website and you do have to have your agenda posted on the website for the requisite period of time. Thanks to technology, of course, we've had a lot of other jurisdictions have had this problem, and one actually got litigated. The decision that the court came to is that minor lapses in posting or when a system goes down does not affect your ability to move forward under the Brown Act. And that's really all I can opine on. As to transparency, as to time to review it, that is for the board to decide.
Is that because the Brown Act requires us only to post the agenda? We're legally required to post the agenda, not the backup.
You are legally required to only post the agenda. And you're correct on that, but no, even if the agenda went down for several hours, basically it's called an inadvertent error or an activity beyond your control. The case, I believe, deals with a server system going down for a short period of time, and the argument being made that the item had to be continued, and the court said no. That's the only thing I can opine on because that's the only relevant part from a legal perspective.
So I would just ask the chair to consider what legally we must do and what the best thing is to do in order to create that. It's what you have to do, and then what your intent is. Is your intent to provide full information, full access to the public before you discuss $1 million? Or is your intent to say, well, the letter of the law says I can, therefore I will?
So what if, without hearing the item, you have no idea, Jill? What if they come up and we say, well, let's delay it to third, and they come up and say, well, by the way, you just lost $1 million because we had to file this on the 30th. I mean, you don't know what the problem is. This could be a very simple problem, be very complex and needs to be delayed. Normally you open the item and then you say, we don't have enough information, we did delay it, or there is enough information. I don't really see the big issue. This could, I assume there's a time constraint reason. That's because why we're here. And I would request that you open the item and find out what that is.
And I think I would like to hear from Ed and Drew on this. And I'm going to open the item 1.2 cannabis, discuss the current status of the cannabis department's budget, give direction to staff regarding providing a general fund contribution or advance, and authorize the CAO and auditor to sign any budget adjustments necessary based on the direction given. $1,018,154 from general fund in the form of a contribution or advance based on BOS direction. Ed or Drew, which one of you guys is going to take the lead on this?
Hey, good afternoon again. Ed Presley, Interim Deputy Director of Building and Planning. And I think it was just a matter of convenience bringing this forward and having this discussion to give an overview of what's going on in cannabis and what's really the way forward before we get to mid-budget year. So everyone is transparent on what's going on. So that's kind of the standing. That's the 30,000-foot view from where I'm at. I don't know if the acting division director has anything to add to that.
Good afternoon, Chair, Board. Drew Plabani, Environmental Compliance Specialist, Acting Division Director for the Cannabis Division. To your questions, I am not personally aware of any particular time crunch. I'd be happy to engage in whatever questions related to this item you may have. And I can go on, or I can wait for your questions at your pleasure.
Go ahead and give us your spiel, and then we'll have questions for you.
All right. As I communicated it during a previous Board of Supervisors meeting, it was the intent of the Cannabis Division to present a budget adjustment to you all. Simply put, what I was hoping to see as the outcome, if you guys can pull up the budget sheet that you've been provided in backup, it is account number 2300. And where I guess this all started was my request to increase the allocations to 2300 to enable us to pay the environmental review consultants the full amount as listed in their contracts, so $600,000 per year. I think 2300 reflects the additional $275,000 that we would be requesting to add, and that is out of grant funds that we've already received. And feel free to ask any questions.
Do you know what page number in the backup data that is?
It is the bottom, I think it's the bottom link.
Jill, how many pages total are in the packet?
147.
It's probably around 130, 135-ish would be my best guess.
I guess I was looking at it from the online agenda. So
Yeah,
those,
that's not working for me, but try and.
Here's what I'm looking at here is
129. So it starts on the budget that he's talking about starts on page 129.
128.
Oh, sorry. Yep, 128. I apologize.
And I'm sorry, the account number again, Drew?
2,300.
I'm seeing $314,396 year-to-date actual. And so, oh, and then that,
Right, with an increase of 282,000.
okay. And so that's what you really need today?
That is what I believe that the cannabis division needs to continue forward with the current rate of licensing
And those dollars will come from where?
from the local jurisdiction assistance grant,
And
which we've already received.
so this doesn't affect contingency, general fund?
Correct.
The problem, the reason this is before you guys today is because the revenues that were projected by the department and adopted by this board were at $1.1 million. They're only going to receive, their estimate is to only receive $400,000. So essentially, in order to continue to operate throughout the rest of the fiscal year, we either, as a county, you as a board have to decide if they're going to operate in the deficit, if we're going to give them a general fund contribution to make their revenues whole because we can't cut their expenditures any farther. We've already cut them as far as we can. Or if you're going to give them a general fund advance to operate as a loan until they can bring in additional revenues to offset those costs. That's the big issue. That's the big urgency behind bringing this forward, is the concern that they are not going to meet revenue projections, and they are aware of that. They brought that to our attention, and we're bringing this to you to consider what are we going to do, because it's not that they're not going to meet revenue projections by $30,000 that we could push off and wait and see. They're not going to meet revenue by projections by approximately $1 million. And so that's a larger issue that we need to get some direction on. How do you want to move forward?
So I would, I'm not done with questions, I take it. I'm confused as to why, I'm not sure how to ask this. I hear a lot of concern from this part of the room. I don't hear a ton of concern from this part of the room, and I'm wondering what the difference is.
My opinion is that we have a difference of opinion.
And so you feel that you can meet budget projections without us having to dole out $1 million today?
We absolutely cannot meet the budget projections as presented in the adopted budget. However, in terms of, again, my opinion, if we were to break out cannabis division expenditures, I would qualify some of those as essential expenses and some of them as non-essential expenses. The reason that you see all of the local jurisdiction assistance grant information in the backup is because at this point, with the amendment to the grant that we've submitted to the state, pretty much covers all of cannabis division staff costs. So from my perspective, again, if we take into account, so I think Susie stated 400. I think my opinion would be it's closer to 500. That the projection for the remainder of the fiscal year is 400, and we've already taken in about a little over 100 to my understanding, that is sufficient to meet all of the essential expenses required to run the cannabis division as far as licensing is concerned. The two big items that, again, from my perspective, are non-essential in terms of licensing are the items in 2399.
I'm sorry, I don't see a 2399.
Interfund professional.
Only have 2 pages.
It's on the first page, under 200 serve and supply, below that
Oh, I see.
total number.
So we kind of have 2 questions going on. Is one, is there an urgency to do this today or wait and for people to digest this more. Two, if we're, obviously the general fund can't take $1 million hit without being replaced somehow. And so what's the time period on that money being replaced? If we're borrowing out of it, are we talking like a fiscal?
The reason for my initial request to increase the allocations to environmental review consultants, the intent being to get through the remaining CEQA projects, APSI projects, ideally by the end of this fiscal year, which would then normalize our fee-based revenue stream by the end of fiscal year 23-24.
Right.
And so if we don't make that adjustment, in my opinion, we don't see normalized revenues until 24-25.
Okay, so I understand that.
So
but we still have some money set aside within what the state gave us, and I'm forgetting the name of that the last 20% spent at a later date. Is that going to repay this loan?
No, because these items, at least from 2399, do not qualify as approved expenditures
Okay.
under the grant.
So the only way we can repay this loan is out of the future fees and possibly, if the board decides, future tax revenue, which would be general fund money.
I agree.
The question I would have is, how do you repay a loan out of fees when fees are there to provide only for a service? You can't make money on fees. Therefore, how do you repay a loan?
Because they're for the cost of the program, and the program didn't collect sufficient fees in the beginning. So therefore the program has debt that has to be covered from somewhere.
So you raise those
So you
fees to
raise
cover the
those
debt.
fees to cover the debt. And any loan that is given, the $18,000 advance that was provided at the last board meeting, plus any advance that would be, if that's the desire of the board, would then be taken into consideration in the fee study when the department does a fee study for their licensing fees. And that would be added into their expenses and then calculated out to determine what the fee of issuing that license and servicing that license is.
Making a motion.
We
I haven't called
We haven't done
this
that.
public
Yeah.
comment.
Any more technical questions?
I guess if anything, just the clarity, just make sure I didn't hear anybody wrong before I can't ask questions again. I heard the director of the planning department say that this item being brought forward today was a matter of convenience to give us a 30,000-foot view before a mid-year budget review. And I heard the interim deputy director say that there was no time crunch, and the only thing he's asking for is $282,000 out of the grant funds. Am I correct?
As far as my part, I agree.
Okay.
It's $264,000. Grant.
Oh, I don't know how I wrote that down wrong. Thank you. $264,000.
All right.
Thank you.
With that, we will open public comment. Public comment on item 1.2.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. John Bauer from Junction City. I want to encourage funding the full amount to support the program. The program has contributed mightily to the county coffers over the years in many ways. And I would like to see it funded out of the general fund as a contribution, not a loan. The cannabis program has generated tremendous revenue for the county in terms of building permits over the course of the program, a huge boom in building, increase in property taxes, the general revenue derived from increased sales taxes and things like that. The contribution to the general plan update, the same amount, roughly $1.1 million that was pulled, that went into the general fund from the cannabis code enforcement fines 1 year, that 2 weeks later, that same 1.1 got brought out of the general fund and put into the jail when it was needed. So the cannabis program has contributed to the county generally in big ways over the years. This is an opportunity for the general fund to give back in time of need and try to give staff what they need to do this important job. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Supervisors, Lisa Wright from Lewiston. I would recommend that you only go as far as what our interim director, Pabani, is asking for. We really have not had time to review either, the 147 pages. I wouldn't go beyond asking for what he's requesting, and he said it's not urgent. So my suggestion would be to continue this to January 3rd. Let us get through. I couldn't access the documents, all of them. If you want me to start on what I was able to access, I can certainly provide comment. I don't think you're going to want to hear some of it, but I can do that. So I guess I have my 3 minutes. I might as well. But my suggestion is you continue this and allow for full public disclosure and absorption of this information. You're basically being asked to cover, the deficit of the interfund professional 2399. Why are we paying out over $1 million? It's actually being bumped up in this request. For what professional services? I don't know. Maybe to defend poor decisions of previous boards or this board, maybe to enrich county council for their poor advice. I think if you open up, you should all ask for copies of depositions that took place of Ms. Hawkins by Amanda Erheimer last summer, where we went through extensive detail of this fund, of the expenditures coming out of 2399 since 2018. And you will find over $3.2 million was taken out for non-beneficial purposes for fee payers. This is a fee payer-based program. The fees cannot be used for anything else under state law than something to benefit the fee payer. And I do not buy that we would have shut down the program if we hadn't defended the poor decisions of a board as being beneficial to the fee payer. You cannot utilize fee payer funds in the manner in which they've been utilized. Now you're asking for it again. The deficit is being created by that account. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a need for the $1 million. If you're going to do anything today, if you won't continue it and absorb the 147 pages in full detail, which we didn't have access to, which I didn't feel like I had an opportunity to review everything, certainly, then at least just do the piece that your acting director is. And that's funded with grant funds. You don't need to even delve into the general fund. The only deficit is those professional services. Go back to 2018 and see what that's been spent on. It's not benefited the fee payers. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Tom Belanco, Douglas City. I suppose all things being equal, if the question is this urgent or isn't this urgent? And if maybe it's not urgent, more time to go over these things, I think is worthwhile. Number one, it's a lot of money. Number two, it's going to have to come back from somewhere, presumably the industry, the cannabis industry, where it's headed. Number three, it's going to consultants that I personally, and you probably have a different understanding, I am not sure we're getting our money's worth from these consultants. And I'd like to know that you are sure. And if you didn't even have the full 24 hours to review that, and we haven't maybe had the feedback we need, I don't have confidence that you have that kind of certainty, which I think we need, of where this money is going. Not just, okay, it's going from general fund to cannabis, but where's it going from there? And is it is it worth what we're spending? And is it going to be worth making cannabis pay that back? So if there is an option to extend the time for this, I'm all for it. I personally haven't had time to dig into these numbers, so I don't know where to come down on this one way or the other. And I think that's the point two supervisors were making, that if this is not do or die today, let's not do it today. Thank you.
Adrian Keys.
Good afternoon, supervisors. Adrian Keys from Hayfork. Yeah, this is a super complex issue, really hard to digest in that much time. I do think that the county has the ability and should have the will to support the cannabis budget with the allocation, whether it be today or if this gets postponed or whatnot at a later date. And I tend to agree with the idea that a lot of these interfund transfers that we're always told were to enhance the program. I mean, it's been, to me at least, it's been quite clear that where we're at now was a destination that was unavoidable with the way that those funds were being managed. That there is no amount of money that you could charge for our permits locally that will ever be able to pay for all of the places where this money has been diverted to. Now, I don't have the information that Ms. Wright presented. It was very illuminating. It's almost like you don't even need that level of detail because it's just so easy to see from the outside that the county was draining out the fund and that we would end up in this position. So when the time comes, please do allocate that money. I see no reason to consider it a loan. And I would hope that you can pass a motion similar to that. Thank you.
I have no other raised hands.
Submit.
I have one.
Oh, you have another one?
Dana Hauser.
Hello, Chair and Board. This is Dana from Hayfork. I think that not knowing the details, like Adrian just said, I think it has been clear that the cannabis fund has been drained and been used as, one could say, a slush fund for the last, since its origin. If the acting director says that a certain amount of money is needed to continuing issuing licenses at the rate that they currently have been issued, I think that's absolutely what needs to be allocated. I know you guys know me well enough to know that you know that I'm pissed. So I'm going to stop. But thank you and Happy New Year.
Chris.
Hi, Chris Williams, Weaverville. I just want to, and this is always rare, so shout out to Jill, that we should table this item and continue it, just so that we have enough time to go over what this really means. We are in this position because we didn't have proper oversight of these funds before, and we know from depositions that they were crazily misappropriated. But if it's not continued, or if we can, piecemeal it, then I would definitely, let's go with what our acting director has asked for today, and then continue the rest. I don't know if that's possible, but we're in a real predicament, and we definitely need this money. But let's make sure that we're doing our due diligence. Thank you.
I have no other raised hands.
Public comment.
You have public comment?
It's not from me.
You want to?
Do you want me to read it there?
Yeah, do the Keith thing. Go out there and be public for a minute.
So this public comment was received from Daryl Forsland. He doesn't have enough bandwidth to run the Zoom from his house and still Zoom into the meeting, and he's not well to be able to attend in person. So he writes, item 1.2 requests $1,018,154 from the general fund when the contingency is less than $550,000. I believe budget adjustments require a 4/5 vote and cannot be put off on the CAO and auditor. There seem to be items on the proposed budget that should be reviewed as well.
All right, with that, we will close public comment.
Can I make a brief comment? As not a member of public, as counsel.
Yes, you
Okay.
are most welcome.
Absolutely. I just want to make sure the board is aware that the reason that admin and put this item on as an emergency item is because there is a government code that specifically states that if a department or department head spends money that is over what is allocated and where the budget is, they are personally liable for it. And so my understanding is that the director of this department had concern about that or was aware of that. And was aware that if the time passed and he ended up spending money that was allocated but not received, that would be a personal liability for him. So that's why admin did. I don't think from county council's perspective, admin's perspective, we have any desire other than to put it forward as at the request of the department.
So if we wait the 7 days or 10 days, whatever it is, are we in danger of that?
So they said the county's not in danger. That's a personal liability of your
But
department.
are we in danger that he's going to have to shut the division down?
Assuming that the 5 days or whatever, however many days it is until January 3rd are likely not going to make a huge difference.
Okay, thank you. With that, I would make a motion to continue this so there is more time for people to digest this. And then I'll have a bunch of comment after that. To the next January 3rd meeting, if I didn't say that already.
Yeah, I'll second that for discussion. I want to hear your comment.
Well, number one, I think the goal here, which should be clear by the future boards, is to get these licenses out. And so to get these moving, and the inter-fund is we now have our own staff and it's to still use the consultants. If that's good money, that's something for us or the future board to look at. But that's the goal. My second is that there seems to be this huge misinformation campaign going on about $3 million being misspent, and that there was no transparency. I will remind the public that for 4 years of budget hearings, not one question was gone over by the public looking into cannabis. The 5th year, the question was a minor question by a person in here that supported the budget. Each of those years, or the last 3 years, we went line by line of where the money was being spent. It was only until the last budget that there was any significant questions of reality. So to say that this was not transparent is, I'll say it, a lie, misinformation. To say that money's been siphoned off of the slush fund is absolutely abhorrent to me. That I find my beliefs are very ethical, and this money goes where it should go. We have found mistakes equaling in the thousands of dollars, but to call this a slush fund is a campaign by somebody that's in a lawsuit with us, and they're trying to mislead the public. So that's just my overall statement and the fact.
Any further discussion on that motion or competing motion?
I have a competing motion. I would move that we allocate $264,000 from and I don't remember the name exactly of the grant, but from the grant funds into the usable funds for
the cannabis division and then move the rest of this discussion to the January 3rd meeting.
Before we go further, I have a technical question. Do we even need to do that? Because the board isn't in charge of that grant funding, are they? That's the department and the state.
They still need the budget allocation in their budget. However, they have sufficient allocation in their budget to make it through the next 5 days until January 3rd when we hear the whole item. So that's up to the pleasure of the board.
By the way, I'll second hers if nobody else did.
Yeah, nobody did. I would just have
Okay.
a question.
Seconding for discussion.
All right. So, my question on that one would be if we gain anything by trying to split it up and make it more complicated, or if we just
an extra budget adjustment.
if we just
More
tackle this
paperwork.
all in one shot at our next board
Okay,
meeting,
good to know.
I think that we would be better off to do it all at once. Personally. Have any competing motions on that end of the table?
To remove my motion, then I agree with that. We don't need to go through the voting process for me.
Withdraw your motion. Yeah.
Thank you. I withdraw my motion.
All right.
Withdraw my second.
Perfect.
He has one last training
I
moment. He's
tried
going
one
to use
last.
it. And I will receive that. Thank you.
Tried to whisper.
Any further discussion?
Mhm.
All right. Go ahead.
The motion is to continue to the January 3rd meeting. Chairman Frazier,
Aye.
Supervisor Groves,
Aye.
Supervisor Cox, Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Supervisor Brown.
Okay. Clerk of the board, item 1.3, acknowledge receipt of and assign a board member to respond to the grand jury report, county council review, JUR 2022-001.
Since Letty's homesick, I'll take this one for her.
She texted me you would.
The grand jury did a report on county council review. They've submitted it to our office pursuant to the code, and the item before you today is just to acknowledge receipt of that report and to assign a board member to respond to the as requested in their report. It's a pretty standard housekeeping process. And then once the response is drafted, then that response will come back to the board as a whole to vote on before sending to the judge.
Any technical questions before we open public comment? One technical question I have, is this one of the rare times I get to be a dictator? Good. All right, any public comment on item 1.3?
Chair Frazier, board members Lisa Wright, Lewiston. I did not have adequate time, given the limitations on access to the information, to review this in order to make public comment. Thank you.
William Foster.
Hello, Board of Supervisors. Thank you for your service. I have a prepared statement that I just want to read. I'd like to respond to Mr. Grove's attack on the Trinity County Grand Jury and its report at the December 20th Board of Service meeting. The grand jury serves an important role in the county government as citizen members of a government watchdog group and is an integral part of the county government and its functions. The grand jury, so to speak, shines a light on issues that concerned citizens bring to the grand jury to review. We see more and more that fewer and fewer people are involved and engaging in our government as citizens. And Mr. Grove's attacks does little to help curb that. In fact, it will, I have no doubt, cause anyone considering serving on the grand jury to hesitate to do so. It would be disingenuous for me to pretend that I have never said anything I regretted when I was upset. So I can understand he may have spoken without thinking. But Mr. Groves owes the grand jury a very public apology, and I hope he steps up and does so. Thank you.
John Brower. The grand jury report, dives into a very contentious subject here in Trinity County. It's been argued over for years. Definitely different viewpoints, definitely times when the information circulating is self-serving and politicized, and so as being part and parcel to the
David G.
Hi, my audio was out. Did I just hear that I can speak now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm David Guyman, and I just wanted to identify myself as a member of the grand jury and this year, and also as the primary lead author of that report that we're discussing. And I just wanted to say that some of the attacks that I heard Supervisor Grove make, I would like to say that if we're going to engage in that kind of thing, then I'm available to defend that report and have a public discussion on that. And we should be talking about the issues and not just attacking the messenger. And that's all I have to say for right now.
Anyone else?
I have no other raised hands.
All right. That will close public comment, bring it back to the board.
I actually have a motion, Dan.
A motion.
Oh, wait a second. Sorry. Public comment.
I closed public comment, but I've already opened it, I guess. Darrow again.
Public comment again from Darrell Forsland. Item 1.3, grand jury report should be reviewed by the new board, not the existing board. I thought the next line applied and it did not. That's the end.
Was there a name on that? Did I miss?
It was Darrow.
Oh.
All right, with that, we will again close public comment and bring it back to the board.
I have a motion.
A motion?
I do.
Okay.
I would move that we ask council to send this back to the grand jury and Judge Harper to get a fair and balanced review. And then if it gets seconded, I'll give my explanation for this.
I'll second.
So within this, and first off, I have no animosity to anybody. I have no idea who's on the grand jury. To the person that said they were the author, it's a shame that you and I haven't talked about this being a major player. It's a shame that county council wasn't able to talk to you. It's a shame that two previous directors weren't able to talk to you. And this is one of my large points. So there's several issues. One is that under civil law, the county the grand jury cannot act on an anonymous complaint. That's against civil code. Number two, it's against civil code not to bring the person that you're making accusations to and to talk to them. In fact, those people are now have a very good case for libel and have the kind of slam dunk to sue the county in this for defamation of character. Number three, which was brought to my attention, that they didn't even have the judge, presiding judge, sign this. They went around to the district attorney to sign this off. And to me, that shows some really interesting, there's no proof in that there's kind of an interesting reason they did that, but I have my suppositions why they would go to the district attorney who, since again, this is not a criminal grand jury. So I think there's a lot of, and number four is what I referred to. None of the players that were involved with this were asked questions. And so this is, again, shocking to me that we would have this, what I view, a very unfair investigation. And for nobody on this board to be asked, nobody basically in county government was asked, all based on a complaint that they shouldn't have been acting on. So my request is that this go back to the judge. We talk to them about the grand jury re-reviewing this in a fair and balanced way, getting all the players and people into it, and then for the rewrite it for a future board to then respond to.
Keith, if I remember correctly, the grand jury report that I read was signed by Judge Mike Harper.
It's in the agenda.
The other 3 or 4 that you mentioned, I'm not sure of, but I think that
I was told that's not correct, but I will stand corrected if it is.
I'm almost positive I saw his initials at the top of the page.
I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. I do know that there typically are signed off by county council. I know that didn't happen.
The report that's included in backup does have Harper's.
Okay,
It
so
does
I
indicate that he was Harper reviewed it on the 8th of December, I believe is the date. on
okay,
that.
I apologize for that misunderstanding. I still stand on the other civil violations that have been done in this process. And I think, I mean, my God, this is America. You have the ability to face your accusers and for them to find out the full information. And I just, I know I've riled feathers with the grand jury, but come on, guys, let's be fair here. Let's talk to the people in, and then you guys can make your decision.
Is that still on? That's the motion's made already, right?
Yeah, motion's
Okay.
made and seconded,
All right,
right?
thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with that action if, as long as we're fulfilling our legal requirements and we have time to do that and still have a response. Which, the way I read it, we have until about March 8th.
And I appreciate you asking me the question, but I believe I would have to say I have a conflict on advising the board on this matter.
Yes.
So you would have to contact the district attorney because he has taken ownership of this report.
I'm curious how the Superior Court judge would sign off on something that in any way was unfair or unduly handled.
I can't answer that. He does not oversee the grand jury. In terms of the product, he does not review it. He does not advise them. That is done by county council and the district attorney's office. They are merely the ones that impanel them. So the question would be, why did the district attorney sign off on it?
And the reason would be,
We would need to know.
but.
So if anything, I realized that we would be losing a few extra days.
Oh, I don't
But
mind
if
losing a
we-
few extra days as long as I actually was going to volunteer to try to answer this myself. But I have no problem trying to go back and have.
That wasn't going to be my statement. My statement was going to be, we would be losing a few extra days if we waited on this until January 3rd as well, rather than all the days to send it back to ask, if you wanted clarity, to ask the district attorney. Otherwise, my motion would be that the chair assigns this to someone today.
I would love to have clarity because I also have some concerns about this grand jury report when there was a lack of interviews. I feel I would be willing to appoint someone today. We do have a motion on the table, so I think well,
if you choose to appoint somebody today, I think Dan is the only choice, realistically, of what's left. But I will also say that it leads, appointing and making a reply today is going to further embarrass the grand jury, pointing out all the weaknesses and misinformation that was put in this article. So I think it's actually fairer to them to send this back and for them to correct the myriad of mistakes that were made in it, and versus us just coming back and firing, explaining the bucket loads of problems in this.
So counsel, if I could ask a question, and not asking you to cross a line of a conflict of interest, but just process wise, if we chose that option to send back to the grand jury, did you say, does the 60 days or 90 days, whatever we have to respond, does that start over?
Again, I can't respond to that. I believe I have a conflict. You'd need to consult with the district attorney.
Okay, sorry.
So, and I think
Is the district attorney on the line? Do we?
Could we take a recess and call him? With 10 minutes?
we can do that. We can we'll recess until 4 o'clock. And maybe we can get a hold of him. And I don't have a problem kind of trying to cover our bases, but I said we weren't going to take any breaks, and I broke my rule. You gave us full
Are you
60
officially
minutes.
recessing until 4?
Well, I'm giving Jill an opportunity to try to get a hold of someone. All right. It is 4 o'clock. We will call the December 29th special meeting of the Trinity County Board of Supervisors back to order. We're moving back into item 1.3. A motion and a second. We're in discussion, so.
So I spoke with the district attorney who said he thought it was his opinion that it was a very good idea to send the document back to the grand jury. He thought that the 90-day period to respond would start over, but he wanted a little time to look that up and make sure because he's never seen this done before. So his suggestion was if you could wait the 5 days until January 3rd meeting, that would give him time to make sure of his presumption that the 90 days starts over, and then he recommended doing so. Or thought that would be a good idea, I guess were his words.
Okay, well, my question to that would be, because we have 90 days and it's a good idea to send it back anyway, why don't we just send it back? And then if our 90 days doesn't start over, we can address that, because 90 days is still 90 days to respond. And I would think that we could get a response back from them and still respond before March. So I would say I would be in favor of passing the motion that was presented. And then
How do you know that they would return something if the 90 days gets chewed up and they take 89 days or 93 days? Then we're in trouble.
We would have to respond without them getting back to us if they did that, which
Oh, you would just respond with this document.
yeah, if the grand jury didn't come back to us with something, then we would have to respond to what we had. And
would you like to assign a supervisor to respond at this point, assuming in the case that they don't respond and send a new one back and you have to respond to this report?
I would be fine with that also.
If you don't, someone will.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. And yeah, once again, we're assuming, which is dangerous, but I would assume that if we send it back, they'll have a response of some sort. And then we would go from there. But in the event that they didn't, I would still be willing to volunteer to respond. So we have,
Well, if you would prefer me to put that into the motion that Dan, to do what the motion says and to appoint Dan to
Be the one to respond to the
one
report.
respond.
who seconded that?
Jeremy, do you-
I abide to that amendment.
All right. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I hope that they take this in the spirit that it's really meant, and that I would love to talk to the grand jury, and I'm sure all the parties involved would be love to talk to the grand jury. And there's probably 10 people that I could name that should be talking to them about this. So hopefully looking forward to clearing the record on a lot of the findings in this report.
I would ask the grand jury too, since it's going back and they're considering, when the beginning of that statement says that this was all started in response to an anonymous letter. Was the letter truly anonymous, or are they holding anonymity? I would like that distinction.
So are you asking Supervisor Groves?
Would you put that into your motion, please?
That question?
Yeah.
Well, that's part of what he laid out in his.
So what they say is they received an anonymous letter. So as I stated earlier, that would be an action they're not supposed to move on. But if they misspoke and they received a letter that they're keeping anonymous, that is something. So if they would like to clear that up, that would be part of the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, the one question I would have because the way Supervisor Grove stated that, when he asked that his motion include my name as the one to respond to that, do you mean that and to include when this comes back, if the grand jury does
Yes.
take it up, or?
This
no
in
matter
present form or future form.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's clear before we vote on it in case that's an issue that I don't have a problem with
Council, how does this work in terms of, I thought that assignment by this was by the chair waving the magic wand. It's now happening by motion. Which way is it normally?
The chair may waving the magic wand, but the board always has the right by majority vote to override the chair. So it's fine to put it in a motion.
I didn't think it wasn't fine. I just wanted to know how
Yeah,
it
so
works.
I guess in theory, this just shows confidence of the board. There's confidence in the board when the chair does something and nobody says anything, right?
Right.
Nobody challenges it.
Sure.
But this puts it all in a package to be confident, the confidence of the board that moves through.
The clarity that I asked Supervisor Groves to include as far as the anonymous letter need to be seconded, or is that some
Well, I think-
assumed part of the?
Well, if we could put the whole diatribe into a,
I think that's an important point because the entire package stems on that. It appears to me.
So my understanding is the board is looking to have, and you said council, but I would request that you not have me do it, but have the CAO do it, to send it back to the grand jury and ask them to reinvestigate it, or ask them to investigate it since they didn't follow both the penal code and the civil code related to what the requirements are. One of the civil codes is not responding to an anonymous complaint, so it would be included.
so when the CAO's office sent in the request to the grand jury, they're going to have to go through our probably watch the video and make sure that they get everything that we wanted in there, or go through the minutes.
They're on the line right now, both the author and the foreman, so
They'll be able to hear, yeah.
hopefully they understand the intent.
All right, and there will be obviously a formal ask sent to them. So, all right, have we discussed? Are we ready to vote?
Okay, the motion I have is to ask the CAO to send that grand jury.
Yeah, I guess since council has to recuse the conflict on this issue.
Yes.
And it would, the CAO to send back through the district attorney and the grand jury.
And we're supposed to send our response to the judge.
I believe so.
So this,
All right, so the motion is for the CAO to send the grand jury report back to the grand jury and the district attorney and the judge for a fair and balanced review, and appoint Supervisor Frazier to respond to a revised report if we get one, or the original report if we don't.
Susie, that was the grand jury.
The DA and Judge Harper.
and Judge Harper.
So,
sounds like the motion that was made in a much more concise form.
all right, Supervisor Brown.
Aye.
Supervisor Groves.
Aye.
Supervisor Cox.
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Chairman Frazier. Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, we are going to move into closed session. Item 2.1, Government Code Section 54954.5 C, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, number of cases 2, Coopah Valley Tribe versus U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, U.S. District Court Case number 120 CB 01814 JLT EPG, and Westlands Water District versus All Persons, case number 19 CECG 0388 7. Do we have any public comment on closed session?
John Brower from Junction City Supervisors. It is the utmost importance to take our water seriously and do whatever we can to own it and control it and derive maximum benefit from it. And in this case, I think that means not being shy about standing up to Westlands or anyone else who wants our water and our fish's water and our environment's water. So I would say stand up straight and be forthright about this. It's an important fight. It won't be over in our lifetimes. It's only going to get more and more intense. And our fish and our needs from the watershed of origin for this important resource should come first. They have to come first. So go get them.
No raised hands.
All right, perfect. Jill, I'm leaving you a limp neck and bite.
I'm leaving you one that turns off every time you move.
Oh, perfect. Yes, we are returning to closed session.
Do you want a carpet job, Jill? She always got it.
That's awesome.
She's got.
I think
Oh
that
my
Have a
gosh.
safe down there, so.
was from Jeremy rubbing